This is a notorious prison widely renowned for its extreme harshness and utterly terrifying conditions. It is exclusively reserved for only the most dangerous criminals who have been gathered from every region throughout the entire country. Valjean is the central character of this narrative. He was compelled to endure an exceedingly cruel sentence that stretched relentlessly over 19 long and bitter years. The reason behind this ruthless punishment was merely a single unfortunate mistake he once committed. He stole a small loaf of bread with the sole intention of rescuing the life of his beloved nephew who stood on the brink of death due to extreme hunger. Throughout those endless 19 years, Valjean's existence was a continuous series of tormenting days filled with brutal and relentless forced labor. He endured constant humiliation and carried profound despair within his heart each and every day. Every passing day represented yet another fierce challenge in his merciless battle for survival. These relentless experiences gradually caused his soul to become hardened like solid stone. He slowly but inevitably lost all faith and trust in humanity itself. Finally, the long-awaited day of his freedom arrived. Valjean sincerely believed that the door to hope and a brighter future had finally swung wide open before his eyes. However, cruel fate once again mercilessly placed before him an even more ruthless and severe challenge. The chief prison guard, who was infamous for his authoritarian nature and cold-heartedness, intentionally desired to torment Valjean one final time. He commanded Valjean to lift using only his bare hands an enormous and exceedingly heavy ship mast weighing several hundred pounds. This task was utterly impossible for even the strongest prisoners within that notorious prison to accomplish. Yet destiny had bestowed upon Valjean extraordinary physical strength and power from the moment of his birth. Without the slightest hesitation or trace of fear, he confidently stepped forward toward the gigantic mast. Valjean grasped the massive object with his muscular and powerful hands and effortlessly lifted it from the ground. Then, employing incredible superhuman strength, he forcefully hurled the mast down directly at the feet of the astonished and speechless prison guard. The chief guard stood utterly stunned and frozen in disbelief. His eyes burned with furious anger, yet he remained completely powerless against Valjean's unmatched strength. Ultimately, with deep bitterness and resentment filling his heart, the chief guard had no choice but to reluctantly hand over the official document declaring Valjean's freedom. However, what initially appeared to be merely a simple piece of paper symbolizing Valjean's newfound freedom suddenly transformed into yet another even harsher and more inhumane sentence. On that document, it was explicitly stated that Valjean was classified as an extremely dangerous criminal. He was strictly required to report regularly to the local police station. Even the smallest and most trivial mistake would immediately result in him being sent back to the dreadful prison once again. A profound sense of bitterness and injustice completely overwhelmed Valjean's heart and mind. He painfully realized that because of just a tiny loaf of bread he had irretrievably lost his entire youth and personal honor. Now even the freedom that he deeply yearned for was utterly impossible for him to fully experience or enjoy. As Valjean stepped outside of the cold and dark prison, he initially believed he finally had the precious opportunity to restart his life. Yet reality swiftly proved itself to be extremely harsh and unkind. Society coldly turned its back on him and displayed absolutely no mercy or compassion whatsoever. Valjean wandered desperately from one place to another, searching for employment merely to survive. However, everyone he encountered instantly rejected and shunned him as if he carried a dangerous and contagious disease. Even young children cruelly mimicked the adults by throwing stones at him and harshly mocking him whenever he passed by. Even more painfully, Valjean desperately begged the owner of a shabby inn for permission to spend the night inside a simple stable. Yet the innkeeper responded by mercilessly driving him away and treating him as something shameful and unclean. In deep despair, Valjean slowly dragged his weary steps toward a deserted and isolated cemetery. He hoped that this lonely place might offer him a final refuge from the relentless pain and suffering of his existence. However, fate once more unexpectedly altered the direction of his life, guiding him towards something completely different. The place Valjean eventually reached was not the cemetery he intended, but rather a small, humble yet warm and inviting church. Inside, he encountered an elderly priest whose heart overflowed with sincere kindness, compassion, and genuine warmth. This kind priest warmly invited Valjean inside, allowing him to stay safely and comfortably within the peaceful church. He also generously provided Valjean with a lavish and nourishing meal along with a warm, soft, and comforting bed. Nevertheless, Valjean's heart had already been severely hardened by suspicion, doubt, and deep despair accumulated from past experiences. He found himself utterly unable to trust or believe in any genuine act of human kindness again. In the middle of the dark and silent night, Valjean secretly stole the most valuable and precious items from the church and quickly fled the scene. Yet before he could escape very far, the local police swiftly apprehended and arrested him. Valjean now firmly believed with absolute certainty that his life had finally plunged irreversibly into a deep abyss from which there was no possible escape or salvation. However, something miraculous occurred at precisely that moment. Instead of condemning or accusing Valjean, the elderly priest stepped forward and sincerely defended and protected him before the police officers. The priest gently explained that all the valuable items Valjean had taken were actually generous gifts he willingly and deliberately offered to him. Furthermore, the priest kindly handed Valjean 2 additional precious silver candlesticks that Valjean had accidentally forgotten to take along. The police officers found themselves without any legitimate reason or excuse to arrest Valjean and thus reluctantly departed from the scene, feeling deeply confused, bewildered, and astonished. When finally left alone together, the compassionate priest gently placed his hand upon Valjean's trembling shoulder. The priest spoke softly to Valjean in a voice filled with genuine sincerity, profound compassion, and deeply moving emotion. He earnestly encouraged Valjean to permanently abandon the dark and painful memories of his past life. The priest sincerely hoped Valjean would wisely use these precious gifts he had just received as a fresh opportunity to build and create a new meaningful life. At that precise moment, Valjean felt as if his heart had been completely reborn. The pure and powerful light of love, forgiveness, and compassion penetrated deeply into the darkest and most hidden corners of his soul. Valjean stood silently, experiencing overwhelming, profound emotion. He finally made the courageous and determined decision to completely tear apart the official document symbolizing all the disgrace, humiliation, and pain of his past. Valjean resolutely turned his back on his former life filled with crime, misery, and darkness. He began rewriting his own destiny upon fresh new pages of life filled entirely with genuine hope, pure kindness, and authentic inner freedom of both his heart and soul. 8 years passed swiftly in the blink of an eye. Those years felt ephemeral, like a fleeting dream within the expansive journey of a human life. Jean Valjean had once been a prisoner condemned to relentless hard labor. Now he had completely transformed into an entirely different person. Valjean rose triumphantly like a phoenix reborn from the smoldering ashes of a profoundly painful past. He assumed a new identity under the name Madeleine. With this carefully crafted persona, he seamlessly integrated into the upper echelons of society. Madeleine embraced a life filled with abundant wealth and distinguished prestige. Eventually, he became the esteemed owner of the largest and most prosperous textile factory in the region. His reputation expanded broadly throughout all surrounding towns and villages. The local inhabitants trusted Madeleine wholeheartedly and cherished him profoundly. They unanimously decided to elect him as mayor of their small yet thriving town. This honor served as a truly worthy reward for a heart consistently devoted to goodness. It also recognized his extraordinary resilience, which persistently refused to surrender in the face of adversity. Yet life had never genuinely remained eternally calm like the peaceful and reflective surface of an autumn lake. On one fateful and unforgettable day, a serious conflict erupted within Madeleine's textile factory. This intense confrontation involved seasoned female workers and a young woman who had recently joined the workforce named Fantine. Madeleine could not possibly ignore such a glaring injustice unfolding directly within his sphere of responsibility. He promptly decided to personally visit the scene in order to mediate and resolve the dispute. At precisely that critical moment, fate cruelly intervened. Madeleine unexpectedly encountered Javert, who had recently been appointed as the chief of police. In Madeleine's distant past, Javert had served as the mercilessly cold-hearted prison guard during Madeleine's darkest years of imprisonment. An inexplicable dread suddenly pierced Madeleine's heart, causing him profound inner turmoil. The past, which he had long believed lay deeply buried and asleep, unexpectedly began to awaken once again. It emerged like a malevolent ghost, relentlessly threatening to drag him back down into a bottomless abyss of despair. Nonetheless, Madeleine swiftly summoned his inner strength and regained his outward composure. He calmly delegated the matter involving Fantine to his trusted subordinates. Then he deliberately moved forward to directly confront Javert. 8 long years had passed, creating sufficient time to blur old memories. Javert did not immediately recognize Madeleine as the former prisoner he had once guarded. Yet something strangely familiar and utterly inexplicable about Madeleine deeply unsettled Javert's mind. The shadowy figure of the prisoner from years earlier persistently haunted and troubled Javert's thoughts. Suddenly, and without warning, desperate cries for help urgently echoed through the air. An elderly man lay helplessly trapped beneath a heavily loaded horse-drawn cart which had overturned in the center of the road. Without even a single moment of hesitation, Madeleine courageously rushed forward. He swiftly utilized his extraordinary physical strength to effortlessly lift the massive wooden beam. This heroic act immediately freed the elderly man, saving him from certain death. Javert stood nearby, completely frozen in a state of stunned disbelief as he watched this astonishing event unfold. Memories of Jean Valjean surged vividly back to life within Javert's mind with shocking clarity. Javert knew with absolute certainty that only Jean Valjean could possess such superhuman physical strength. From that pivotal moment onward, suspicion quietly began to take root deep within Javert's heart. This suspicion compelled him to secretly investigate the respected and honorable mayor. Late one night while Javert patrolled a deserted street, he observed two figures fiercely struggling nearby. Javert rapidly approached the scene to investigate further. The nobleman involved immediately accused the fragile and helpless girl beside him of assaulting him. Without even the slightest hesitation, Javert prepared to immediately arrest the poor and suffering young woman. At precisely that crucial moment, Madeleine suddenly arrived at the scene. Madeleine felt a profound and intense pain twisting deeply within his heart. He quickly recognized that the victimized woman standing there was Fantine herself. She had previously been employed at his own textile factory. With deep anguish, Madeleine attentively listened as Fantine sorrowfully recounted the relentlessly dark and despairing days she had endured. At that moment, Madeleine suddenly and painfully realized that his own past indifference had tragically driven Fantine into this terrible state of suffering and despair. A profound remorse continuously and mercilessly tormented Madeleine's conscience. He immediately took Fantine directly to the hospital, where he ensured she received the best possible medical care. Madeleine sincerely promised Fantine he would fully protect her daughter and guarantee the child's future safety. However, the next morning Javert suddenly received unexpected news from the Paris police department. The news definitively confirmed that the real Jean Valjean had been captured and arrested. Filled with profound shame and embarrassment for wrongfully suspecting the mayor, Javert hurriedly went to sincerely apologize to Madeleine. Outwardly, Madeleine managed to maintain a calm and composed demeanor, yet deep within his soul a fierce and agonizing internal battle was raging violently. This intense battle pitted Madeleine's strong sense of conscience against his equally powerful instinct for personal safety. Madeleine now faced an extremely painful and cruel dilemma. His first option was to continue remaining silent while living a false and deceptive existence. Doing so would allow an innocent man to unjustly endure imprisonment. The alternative was courageously stepping forward to publicly reveal his true identity. This choice required sacrificing everything Madeleine had painstakingly built. This included endangering the livelihoods of hundreds of factory workers who depended completely upon him. It also meant risking the well-being of Fantine herself, who urgently depended on his continued protection and support. During his moments of greatest mental and emotional anguish, Madeleine suddenly glimpsed the pair of precious silver candlesticks. These treasured candlesticks had once been given to him many years earlier by the kind-hearted and benevolent bishop. They represented a deeply powerful symbol of unconditional forgiveness and spiritual redemption. That illuminating and profound moment penetrated deeply into Madeleine's very soul. He fully understood and accepted that if he chose to continue remaining silent, his tormented spirit would remain permanently submerged in endless darkness. Madeleine resolutely entered the courtroom with determination etched deeply upon his face. He stood calmly yet resolutely before the assembled crowd. He stated openly and with unwavering certainty that he himself was unquestionably the real Jean Valjean. He emphatically emphasized that the man currently on trial was absolutely innocent of any wrongdoing. Ironically, this heartfelt confession was met with widespread disbelief from every person present. The townspeople found themselves utterly incapable of accepting this shocking and distressing revelation. They could not bring themselves to confront the agonizing reality that their deeply admired and morally exemplary mayor had once been a fugitive prisoner who evaded justice many years prior. Overwhelmed by intense anger and engulfed by profound despair, Jean Valjean chose to leave a clear and direct message urgently requesting Javert's presence at the hospital. Valjean firmly believed that all hidden truths and secrets would finally become evident once Javert arrived there. At that very moment, Fantine lay on her deathbed within the hospital walls. After enduring countless years filled with unending hardship and cruel suffering, Fantine's body had become profoundly frail. She was utterly exhausted by prolonged starvation, debilitating illnesses, and relentless oppression. In the brief moments before Fantine drew her final breath, Valjean earnestly wished she would release every worldly sorrow and anxiety that burdened her weary heart. Fantine's sole remaining desire was securing a safe and stable future for her beloved little daughter Cosette. Standing directly before Fantine's pleading and desperately anguished gaze, Valjean solemnly made a sacred vow. He pledged unequivocally that as long as he continued to live, no one would ever be permitted to harm Cosette. Hearing that sincere, heartfelt promise, Fantine gently and quietly passed away. Her face was adorned with a peaceful, radiant smile, something she had tragically never once experienced during her sorrowful and pain-filled life. Fantine's gentle soul then quietly ascended heavenward, compassionately watching over the challenging journey ahead for Valjean. Precisely at that crucial moment, Inspector Javert entered the hospital. Javert instantly recognized Valjean as the elusive convict he had passionately and relentlessly pursued for many years. Javert bitterly blamed himself, feeling deep shame and frustration for momentarily forgetting someone as uniquely significant as Valjean. Valjean fervently implored Javert to grant him 3 days so he could adequately arrange everything necessary for Cosette's future security and well-being. He solemnly assured Javert that afterward he would willingly surrender himself without resistance. However, Javert adamantly refused to believe that a convicted criminal could genuinely possess such honorable intentions and noble character. From Javert's unwavering perspective, Cosette was merely an elaborate pretext crafted by Valjean to prolong his escape. Without a single moment of hesitation, Javert promptly drew his sword, resolutely determined to capture Valjean immediately. Javert firmly believed that no fugitive would ever sincerely surrender himself voluntarily. Valjean, confronted with no other feasible options, was compelled to leap into the freezing cold river whose swift currents rapidly swept him away to safety. After successfully evading Javert's determined pursuit, Valjean hurried directly to the inn where Cosette was enduring cruel exploitation and severe mistreatment at the hands of a greedy innkeeper couple. Valjean generously paid a substantial sum of money to immediately secure Cosette's freedom and safety. He solemnly promised the frightened young girl he would remain faithfully by her side, providing unwavering protection throughout her entire life. Although a glimmer of hope appeared before them, significant dangers and formidable challenges still loomed ahead. The most urgent priority for them was swiftly and discreetly leaving the city. However, just as they cautiously stepped outside the inn, Valjean unexpectedly encountered Javert once again. Their relentless prolonged chase seemed ironically predestined, binding two men from drastically opposing worlds into a ceaseless confrontation. Ultimately, Valjean found himself cornered in what appeared to be an utterly hopeless dead end. Yet fate once again intervened, compassionately offering salvation. Beyond the imposing towering wall stood the church that had previously granted Valjean a renewed opportunity at life. Due to the extraordinary kindness of the priest whom Valjean had once saved, both Valjean and Cosette found refuge. They lived anonymously, peacefully concealed within the protective embrace of the church. Meanwhile, Javert stood beneath a menacing sky filled densely with dark, foreboding clouds. His heart weighed heavily with deep frustration, humiliation, and shame as Valjean once again successfully evaded capture. Javert swore a solemn oath beneath the indifferent stars, vowing with intense determination that he would unquestionably capture Valjean, even if achieving this singular objective required sacrificing his entire existence. 9 years passed swiftly, almost imperceptibly. Cosette blossomed gracefully into a strikingly beautiful and elegant young woman, fully inheriting Fantine's delicate and refined features. Throughout those passing years, Valjean devotedly nurtured Cosette, providing boundless affection and support. His unwavering care enabled her to completely overcome and move beyond her sorrowful past. One day, while Valjean and Cosette engaged in charitable activities along the bustling city streets, they unexpectedly encountered the innkeeper couple from many years prior. The couple's increasingly impoverished and declining situation had amplified their greed and irrationality to unprecedented levels. They immediately created a disruptive public scene, loudly demanding further financial compensation from Valjean for Cosette's earlier redemption. Javert, accompanied by a contingent of police officers, swiftly appeared on the scene. Nevertheless, Valjean cleverly and resourcefully managed to discreetly guide Cosette safely away from Javert's ever-watchful gaze. Throughout her upbringing, Cosette repeatedly experienced confusion and frustration due to their seemingly endless fugitive lifestyle. Her deepest heartfelt longing was simply finding a peaceful, stable, and permanent home where she would never again be forced to evade anyone's scrutiny. During one of her infrequent outings, Cosette unexpectedly encountered and deeply fell in love with an idealistic, passionate young man. He courageously led a student uprising, vigorously striving to implement substantial governmental reforms. When Valjean discovered Cosette's romantic involvement with this revolutionary leader, he experienced profound fear and intense anxiety. Consequently, he quickly took Cosette away to safety. Cosette reluctantly left behind a deeply emotional, heartfelt letter, desperately asking a young woman with dark hair to deliver it directly to her beloved. Yet tragically, this young woman, secretly harboring her own romantic affections for the same revolutionary leader, deceitfully hid the letter away. The war erupted with brutal intensity. The rebellion was swiftly submerged beneath relentless waves of bloody suppression. Amid that chaotic and sorrowful landscape stood a girl with dark hair and unwavering eyes who willingly sacrificed her own life to save the young man. In her final act, she entrusted to him the very letter he had spent so long desperately seeking. Upon receiving the letter, the young man immediately penned heartfelt and anguished words and dispatched them urgently to the location where Valjean and Cosette resided. As Valjean read those poignant words, he grasped a painful yet essential truth: that he could no longer selfishly cling to Cosette and keep her forever by his side. In the secrecy of night, he made the brave decision to disguise himself and daringly penetrated the heavily fortified military barricades to rescue the young man. On the chaotic and violent battlefield, Valjean unexpectedly came to the rescue of Javert, the rigid inspector who had been captured by the rebels. Despite Javert's open mockery and contempt, Valjean resolutely chose to spare the inspector's life. This selfless action vividly demonstrated that forgiveness and compassion were powerful enough to overcome all previous sins and lingering hatred. For Valjean, in that crucial moment, matters of life, death, or even relentless pursuit by the law had lost their significance. What truly mattered to him now was to reclaim his true identity, make amends for past mistakes, and live a life aligned with his deepest moral convictions. Every decision he made arose entirely from compassion and mercy, without any trace of selfish intent or calculated advantage. Javert, who was unbending and principled by nature, was merely a man fiercely devoted to duty and governed by an absolute belief in justice. As dawn's first rays gently illuminated a devastated and blood-soaked Paris, the bitter reality gradually revealed itself. The majority of the brave rebels had already perished. Only a small group of surviving fighters continued their desperate defense amidst the scattered ruins. Saddest of all, ordinary citizens stood indifferent, maintaining their distance, with none possessing sufficient courage to stand united alongside them. Yet in that bleak and hopeless hour, the voice of the youngest boy among the rebels resonated clearly through the oppressive silence. His voice was delicate yet strong, like a gentle yet piercing ray of light bravely dispersing the darkness of despair. That voice was simple, devoid of elaborate rhetoric or flowery speech, yet profoundly sincere and resolutely determined, evoking profound emotions within every listener. It awakened hearts and rekindled the fighting spirit of each remaining soldier. They understood clearly that surrendering at this moment meant the eternal suppression of justice and freedom. Consequently, these brave fighters vowed to resist until the very end, not merely for abstract ideals but also out of an earnest desire to achieve true freedom and justice for everyone. Yet war by its nature is merciless and unrelenting. The boy whose words ignited newfound courage and hope was tragically among the first to fall upon the battlefield. His death was heartbreaking, as the gun in his hand failed to fire the decisive shot due to wet gunpowder. Though his blood seeped deeply into the earth, it nonetheless nourished and strengthened the seeds of hope within the souls of those he left behind. The surviving fighters determinedly resolved never to yield, even as they fully realized their chances of survival were tragically slim. Deafening explosions announced the beginning of their fierce final stand. While terrified citizens tightly locked their windows in fear and powerlessness, the fragile defensive lines inevitably crumbled one after another. Soldiers fell relentlessly, but in that moment of ultimate desperation, the young man courageously raised high the sacred banner representing ideals and justice. With this symbolic act, he sought to affirm that these ideals would endure eternally as long as courageous souls existed to defend them. Guided by instinct and extraordinary kindness, Valjean swiftly intervened, rescuing the severely wounded young man by escaping into the underground sewers. On the cruel battlefield, Javert also arrived, overwhelmed with profound sadness as he beheld the lifeless form of the young rebel, whose eyes remained open, gazing eternally toward a future filled with fairness and freedom. Deeply moved by remorse, Javert silently removed the Medal of Honor pinned to his chest and reverently placed it upon the fallen boy as a belated tribute and a quiet act of contrition. Within the shadows of the dark sewer tunnels, Valjean encountered Javert once more. Realizing that escape was impossible, Valjean earnestly pleaded with the inspector to allow the young man to survive and regain his freedom, readily offering his own life as a willing exchange. Javert, however, for the very first time in his disciplined existence, found himself profoundly shaken by Valjean's earlier act of mercy. His heart was torn between rigid adherence to the law and the unexpected stirrings of human compassion. Valjean slowly turned and began walking away into the enveloping silence of the night. For the first time, Javert stood motionless and made no attempt to hinder Valjean's departure. The turmoil raging within Javert's soul had reached an intensity that was unbearable for any man to withstand. The conflict between his strict duty to the law and his profound recognition of Valjean's genuine goodness had torn Javert apart beyond repair. In the end, Javert chose the tragic and irrevocable path of ending his life by plunging himself into the freezing waters of the dark and indifferent river below. He quietly left behind a world filled with contradictions, bitter sorrow, and relentless suffering. When the young man regained consciousness, he slowly opened his eyes and realized with stunned disbelief that he was still alive amidst the chaos. He gazed around him in utter astonishment as he witnessed the heartbreaking and catastrophic aftermath of the battle that had unfolded. Everywhere he looked, the lifeless bodies of his fallen comrades lay scattered across the blood-soaked battlefield. Their blood, which had been shed selflessly in pursuit of noble ideals of peace, had soaked deeply into the cold, unforgiving earth beneath them. Amidst this bleak and sorrowful landscape of destruction, his eyes suddenly rested upon the figure of the young woman he deeply loved, standing silently nearby. Beside her stood Valjean, the very man who had courageously rescued him from the grip of certain death moments earlier. With a gentle voice tinged with solemnity and sadness, Valjean began to recount the entire painful truth of his hidden past. Valjean revealed that he was a former prisoner who had escaped from captivity and had lived for years in perpetual concealment to evade relentless pursuit by the authorities. Because of this dark reality, Valjean knew he could not openly remain by the side of the adopted daughter he cherished more deeply than life itself. Despite the crushing anguish and sorrow this knowledge brought him, Valjean resolutely chose to quietly retreat into solitude and anonymity. He deliberately withdrew into the shadows, choosing an isolated and hidden existence so that she could freely live a peaceful and joyful life alongside the man she deeply loved. After attentively listening to every word of Valjean's poignant confession, the young man solemnly and earnestly promised from the depths of his heart to preserve this secret forever. Soon afterward their much-anticipated wedding day arrived, finally bringing with it the precious gift of complete happiness and fulfillment that they had always longed for. Yet happiness would prove fleeting as fate unexpectedly intervened and unveiled a truth neither of them had anticipated. They discovered purely by chance that the individual who had risked his own life years earlier to bravely save the young woman from the brutal hands of kidnappers was none other than Valjean himself. Upon realizing this profound revelation, the young couple immediately set forth on an urgent and heartfelt journey, determined to find Valjean and convey their deep gratitude for his courageous sacrifice. After an earnest and diligent search, they finally found Valjean sitting quietly and alone within the solitude of a humble weathered church that had long been forgotten by the outside world. Next to him were two dim flickering candles whose fragile and gentle glow cast faint shadows across his serene yet deeply sorrowful face. Valjean's expression now bore a profound and quiet melancholy, reflecting the heavy loneliness and countless silent sacrifices he had endured without complaint. He had willingly surrendered all the precious joys life could offer, including the simple comfort of sharing daily happiness alongside the daughter he dearly loved. He did so solely to guarantee that her future would remain bright and unburdened by the dark shadow of his hidden past. In these gentle final moments of his life, Valjean experienced a deeply touching reunion with Fantine, the sorrowful mother who many years ago had entrusted her only beloved child to his compassionate and protective care. Just then the young married couple arrived, quietly stepping into the sacred silence of that tender moment. With profound reverence they bowed their heads, deeply moved and filled with immense gratitude for the countless silent acts of sacrifice and kindness Valjean had selflessly bestowed upon them throughout his entire life. As Valjean gazed lovingly upon the woman who was once the innocent child he had tenderly raised, now standing proudly before him having finally attained true happiness and fulfillment, he gently closed his eyes for the last time, feeling true inner peace. Before departing from this world forever, Valjean carefully entrusted to them a heartfelt letter which detailed the tearful yet profoundly meaningful journey of his extraordinary life. His soul peacefully departed, guided gently onward by the benevolent and compassionate bishop from his distant past. It was this saintly bishop who had first granted Valjean the gift of true redemption and spiritual illumination amidst the overwhelming darkness of guilt, despair, and sin. Beneath the vast and limitless sky, those courageous souls who had bravely fought and sacrificed themselves for justice proudly raised their voices, singing triumphantly a profound anthem of hope and victory. This stirring tale was not merely a chronicle of Valjean's extraordinary life alone. It was also a powerful epic that vividly captured the profound strength of forgiveness, boundless compassion, and an unwavering belief in humanity's inherent capacity for profound transformation. Indeed, every individual, regardless of their past, deserves the sacred and genuine opportunity to begin life anew, reclaim their dignity, and rediscover the fundamental goodness within their heart.